A shy girl mopping the floor, an abandoned mansion drowned in midnight rain, and a child's painting hanging solemnly on the wall for 17 silent years. Yet it wasn't the memories that brought her to tears. It was when the aloof heir stepped quietly through the doorway and whispered, "I spent years searching everywhere, just to find the one who painted this, because sometimes a memory thought long forgotten is the only thread left to guide two lost souls back to each other." Don't blink. This story begins with a small dream, the kind someone unknowingly holds onto for a lifetime. Rain had begun at dusk, not heavy but steady enough to fracture the lake behind the mansion into a shimmering mosaic of broken glass. Droplets tapped rhythmically against the tall window panes, mingling with the wind that whispered through. Cracks in the old roof weaving a slow, somber melody. The clock in the hall struck 1. In the silent darkness of Lakehurst House, once home to a wealthy family, now deserted, the only sounds were the soft shuffle of footsteps and the faint clatter of a metal cart rolling across cracked tiles. Emma Brooks, 24, small and slight in her dark janitor's uniform, pushed the cart quietly through the long, hollow corridor. A phone flashlight clamped to the handle cast a faint, narrow beam ahead, just enough to keep moving. She spoke to no one, listened to no music, entertained no thoughts. On nights like this, Emma had learned to exist within the silence. No one asked about her, no one spoke her name. The job was invisible for her, but enough to pay tuition, enough to prove she could still stand on her own 2 feet. Lakehurst was vast, yet in the dark, it seemed to contract into endless hallways and sealed rooms. Grand chandeliers loomed overhead, their crystals veiled in dust that glowed faintly under the flashlight, creating strange, dreamlike illusions. This place was a world unto itself, old, forgotten, where every sound echoed from some distant past. Her shift had stretched longer than usual. Deciding to tackle the attic, untouched for months, Emma headed up. The staircase was steep and narrow, the banister icy beneath her damp palms. Each step groaned as if resisting her passage, as though she were climbing not into a room but into another time. At the top, she stopped before the last door. It wasn't locked. She pushed gently. The hinges groaned, soft, drawn out, almost like a sigh from someone lost in a dream. Her light swept across the attic, thick dust peeling walls, forgotten cloth-draped frames, and boxes stacked carelessly in corners. The air was heavy with mildew and the slow rot of wood. It pressed in around her, heady and close, laced with the scent of time itself. Emma stepped forward. She turned the light carefully until it froze on something ahead. A picture frame, hanging perfectly straight on the far wall. Not a priceless oil painting, not an old family portrait, but a child's drawing, scrawled in wax crayon. A red-roofed house, windows glowing yellow, a lawn of green, trees on either side, 3 figures holding hands beneath a starry sky, while a sun with a smiling face beamed down from the corner. In the lower right, a child's shaky handwriting in pencil read, "Emma, age 7. Her world stopped. She stood there, unmoving, the beam fixed on the picture she had never expected to see again. Her heart clenched, skipped. The air seemed thinner. The rag in her hand tightened in her grip. Her throat closed. How? How? Had a childish summer afternoon sketch survived here? Emma stepped back, memories unspooling in fast reverse. Many years ago, a small brown-haired girl in a cheap checkered dress crouched on the attic floor. Crayons clutched tightly in her tiny hand, red, blue, yellow. Nearby, her mother scrubbed a window in a maid's uniform, silent. The girl looked up at the sunlight pouring in, then bent back down, determined, drawing. No one noticed her. No one stopped her. That afternoon, for the first and only time, she dared to dream of a home. One filled with laughter, with someone waiting, where every window glowed softly into the night. Present-day Emma reached out, fingertips grazing the picture frame. Her hands trembled. Someone had framed this drawing and hung it on the wall. Kept it for more than 15 years. Not everyone keeps such memories. Not everyone saves something from an invisible girl scrubbing floors. And that made it more than just a picture. It was proof. Proof that someone, once, had seen her, remembered her, chose to keep a piece of her, and no matter how small, Emma sank slowly to the wooden floor, leaning back against the wall. The flashlight lay beside her, casting a soft glow upward onto the frame. She stared at this, drawing for a long, long time. Then the tears came, not sobs, not loud, just silent streams that slipped down her cheeks, the quiet release when loneliness, long buried, finally brushed against recognition. She bit her lip, whispered into the stillness. Why? No answer came, only the lake's wind pressing softly against the old window. Only the rain easing as though waiting for someone to open a door to the past. Emma stood at last, wiped her tears away. She didn't know why the picture remained, who had framed it, but she knew this. She was no longer invisible in this house. And as she stepped out of the attic, her footsteps lighter now, something vast and unknown began to rise inside her, a wave gathering quietly, still searching for a place to break. Emma remained seated, the cold attic floor seeping through her shirt, pressing against her spine. From where her phone lay casting its slanted beam, the happy house painting glowed strangely, as though the light came not from the flashlight, but from memory itself. Her fingertip brushed the glass, tracing the faint dust clinging to the upper left corner. Cold, rough. Whoever had framed it, hung it with care, had resisted wiping it clean, preserving perhaps a small piece of that long-gone afternoon. Emma lowered her head. The past drifted back, slow, merciless. Long ago. The mansion had been brighter then, newer. People moved briskly through its halls. Emma, just 7, her thin legs scurrying after her mother, clutched a worn bag of crayons. Her mother, quiet, kind, tired, cleaned the house by the hour. The owners were known to be strict, but fair. Children, however, were not welcome. Her mother warned her to sit still, stay out of the way, be invisible. So Emma sat quietly in the attic where few ventured, and drew with all the tender force of a child's imagination, a house glowing with warmth, laughter, green trees, and a table set for three people. Though in her real life there had only ever been 2, it was the first drawing Emma had made with her whole heart, and it was the only thing she left behind when they were cast out that same afternoon. Her mother accused of stealing. No. One asked questions. No one wanted explanations. They needed only a reason to expel the poor from a house too pristine for them. Emma hadn't cried that day, but from that moment on, she never again drew a happy house. No, Emma drew in a deep breath, her hand still resting on the frame. She knew every creak in this place. Every drafty crack and half-closed door belonged to a hidden part of her story. Seeing the picture now did not warm her. It pierced her. It reminded her that once she'd believed, and that she'd been turned away, unwanted. Places like this, elegant, serene, immaculate, only allowed people like her and her mother to exist in passing, backs bent low, mopping quietly in the margins. Emma stood, wiped her eyes. She was no longer that child, yet the shame clung to her still, like dust that would never come clean. She left the attic without a sound, closing the door so softly it barely clicked shut. The hallway beyond glowed faintly, the same as every night, casting fractured patterns across the stone walls. She descended the stairs quietly, ghost-like. Each step echoed with a voice she knew too well. Her own, at 10, at 15, at 20. I'm just the cleaning girl. I don't belong here. Even if I once existed here, no one remembers. No one knew she'd spent a summer in this house. No one knew she'd once dared to draw a dream on its attic wall. Now, only she remembered, and the drawing, which clung to the past like a secret too stubborn to fade. Emma returned to the parlor and resumed her work. The mop glided over the scuffed wooden floor. Around her, portraits of stern-faced aristocrats lined the walls, strangers' eyes forever gazing above, never down. She wiped and wiped, unaware that she was crying. Again, a tear slipped from her cheek, landing soundlessly on the newly cleaned floor. It mixed with the mop water, vanished. That night in her small rented room atop an aging apartment building, Emma opened a sketchbook she hadn't touched in years. The first page held a rough, unfinished drawing of a house. Her hand stilled. She couldn't bring herself to finish it. Back at the lake house, the iron gate shivered in the rain-soaked night. A man stood outside, someone Emma had only glimpsed once in the haze of childhood memory. He wasn't here to find home. He had come to sell whatever was left of it. Wind hissed through the cracks in the ground floor windows, carrying with it the hush of something shifting. Outside, the rain from earlier clung stubbornly to the night, falling cold and relentless beneath a sky smeared with ash-gray clouds. The lake rippled faintly, catching the lone flickering light from the last working lamp in the garden. Emma Brooks crouched beneath the staircase, scrubbing the baseboards with steady care. The air around her reeked of damp wood, cleaning agents, and something faintly acidic. She moved methodically, as always, her back rounded, sleeves pushed to the elbows, yellow gloves worn thin with use. Then the front door swung open. A soft but resolute click echoed through the vast hall. In an instant, the house shifted, from stillness to motion, from memory to presence. Cold wind swept inside, along with the silhouette of a tall man. Rain dripped from his slate-gray raincoat, trailing onto the dusty tiles in dark ribbons. Under the flickering chandelier, Nathaniel Carter, 30 years old, sole heir to the mansion, emerged like a punctuation mark at the end of the house's long, silent sentence. He paused at the entrance, tugging his hood down. Dark hair clung wet to his forehead, and his eyes, deep-set, heavy with fatigue and quiet wariness, scanned the room. Emma looked up. Still clutching her rag, she rose quickly, instinctively. A strange tension filled her. Not fear, exactly, but something sharper. Whoever this man was, he didn't feel like a visitor. He belonged. Nathaniel stepped further into the hall, his eyes landing squarely on Emma. "Who gave you permission to go upstairs?" His voice wasn't raised, it wasn't cruel, but it was cold. Stone cold like the mansion's walls. Emma froze. Her heart raced, words catching in her throat. She fumbled to answer as he tilted his head slightly, waiting. I was just cleaning. The attic was dusty, and I thought—" He cut her off with a slight raise of his hand. His tone remained even, his gaze unmoving. "Next time, stick to your assigned work." No. Anger, no insults, but no room left for discussion either. Emma stood stiff, lowering her eyes. She nodded faintly, gripping her mop and bucket. Her shoes slapped softly against the tile as she retreated, each step pulling her deeper into a familiar sense of smallness. Nathaniel watched her leave, though his eyes quickly wandered past her as if she had already vanished. Turning away, he mounted the stairs without another word. That night, Emma sat alone in her tiny attic room, just big enough for a narrow bed, a battered desk, and a lopsided easel propped up by old books. Her uniform hung on the back of a chair. On the desk, her sketchbook lay open, its first page half filled with a house she couldn't bring herself to finish. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't turned on music or reached for her laptop. She simply sat there, staring at her bare hands. The gloves were gone, but faint red indentations still marked her skin. Her fingers trembled, her vision blurred. Why did it hurt so much over something so small? Because it wasn't small. It felt just like before, just like the day they had cast her mother out without proof, without mercy. Just like every glance from people who didn't care who you were, only that you did not belong. Somewhere deep in Lakehurst House, Nathaniel stood before his grandfather's old study. His eyes drifted down the hallway, pausing on the framed crayon drawing. Hanging quietly at the end, a simple picture of a house. He remembered it from childhood, always there, unchanged, suspended in time. Tonight, as he returned after years away, it still hung in its place, tenderly preserved, defying the passage of years. He didn't know that. The girl he had just dismissed with icy indifference was the very one who had once drawn the only fragment of light that had ever existed in his lonely, forgotten boyhood. The sky held back its rain, yet hung low and heavy, thick clouds pressing down until the very air inside the mansion felt dense and unmoving. The light from the grand window in the main hall was dim, only enough to reveal the fine dust suspended. Mid-air like tiny ghosts, Emma worked quietly, crouched by a wooden shelf lined with pale, aging porcelain vases. She didn't know their worth, but she could sense their importance in the way they stood, precise, orderly, resting gently on velvet mats as though preserved for reverence, not beauty. Her sleeve caught as she wiped, snagging against the wound cloth in her hand. It happened fast. The vase, slender and pale as smoke, tipped delicately, almost gracefully, before gravity claimed it. A brittle crack. Time stopped. Shards scattered like crushed snow, fanning out in soft ruin. Emma froze, breath suspended, then fell to her knees. Fingers trembling, she gathered the pieces as if they were fragments of a memory she might somehow stitch whole again. Then, footsteps. He had returned. Nathaniel stood quietly at the threshold. He didn't need to come closer or raise. His voice, his presence alone made the air shift. People like you only know how to destroy things. His words were calm, without anger, and because of that, they cut deeper, slicing clean and precise. Emma clenched her lower lip, eyes burning. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, only whispered, "I'm sorry." She rose without waiting for permission, leaving behind the broken porcelain and a silence heavy as the lake outside. That night, the mansion remained hushed, steeped in shadows. Nathaniel sat alone in an old armchair, staring not at his phone, but at the wall across from him. There the child's drawing still hung, and simple and naive, yet somehow luminous. A house with glowing windows, 3 figures hand in hand, a smiling sun beaming above them. No one had taken it down, not once in more than 15 years. It was the first drawing that had ever made a 10-year-old boy believe in happiness. Something stirred in him now. Not anger over a shattered vase, but something far more unsettling. Guilt, because the look in Emma's eyes, her quiet endurance, her bowed head, they felt achingly familiar. He remembered now, long ago, he had seen a girl sitting right there in this house, crayons clutched tight, drawing something only she could see. He had never known her name, but he remembered her slender shoulders, her serious gaze, her small hands gripping dreams too big for her tiny frame. Maybe she had never really left, and maybe tonight he had driven her away all over again. Later, as the hall lights cast faint golden pools on faded portraits, Nathaniel stopped in front of the attic, drawing once more. The happy house remained, undisturbed, as if time itself had chosen to shelter it. He stared for a long time, conflicted, something fraying inside him. Could it be true? Could the girl who once drew hope into his childhood, who gave him his only glimpse of warmth in this cold, echoing house, be the same woman he had just wounded with careless, cutting words? If so, then for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Carter had spoken harshly, to the very memory that had once saved him. The study, once belonging to his grandfather, a room Nathaniel had long avoided since the old man's passing, now felt like the only place he could bear to be. The silence pressed in softly, broken only by the amber glow of a single desk lamp spilling light over a stack of old papers the former housekeeper had carefully archived. Nathaniel sat, his expression still as a lake at dawn. Since that afternoon, when the porcelain vase had shattered and Emma's gaze had met, his not with anger but with quiet endurance, something in him had begun to shift. It wasn't the broken vase that unsettled him. It was her silence, the way she hadn't defended herself. Restless, he began rifling through the yellowed folders, aimless at first, as though searching for an answer to a question he hadn't yet formed. His hand paused over a sheaf of papers, neatly clipped together, their edges soft with age. The ink had blurred slightly, but the title was still legible. Lakehurst House Staff Roster, June 1998. He flipped through, scanning half-consciously, until his eyes snagged on a single entry. Mary Brooks, housemaid. Beneath it, in faint blue ink, a note scribbled by hand. Daughter, accompanying. Emma Brooks, age 7. Nathaniel froze. The lamplight suddenly seemed too bright, shining harshly into a part of the past he had never tried to reach. Slowly, he lifted his gaze toward the framed drawing in the corner of the room. The red-roofed house. The green lawn of the smiling sun, and in the bottom corner the name scrawled in a child's uneven hand, Emma, age 7. Outside, wind stirred the curtains gently. For a moment, the room felt impossibly quiet, like the breath held between two children long ago. He remembered now, a boy of 10, standing quietly in the attic, watching that same drawing for what felt like hours. Back then, he hadn't had words for the feeling it gave him. Only this: it had been warm, no commands, no criticism, no absence. That simple crayon house was the first thing to ever make him believe that somewhere, out in the vast and unknowable world, someone had dared to imagine what home should feel like. Late that night, Nathaniel didn't return to his own room. Instead, he wandered the dim corridors, the golden light from wall sconces stretching across closed wooden doors. He drifted without thought until he reached the main staircase. There he stopped, hidden behind a stone column, half in shadow. Emma was kneeling on the floor below. She worked quietly, scrubbing the stone tiles in small, careful circles. There was no rush in her movements, no resentment. No one had asked for that level of care. No one would ever notice, except him, the silent observer, watching from the dark. And for the first time, Nathaniel saw more than a hired girl. He saw someone meticulously tending to her own forgotten memories, scrubbing away at years of silent endurance with hands that still carried invisible scars. She wasn't simply cleaning, she was preserving. As Emma finished, she smoothed her apron, folded her cloth neatly, and rose. Every action quiet and precise, a ritual practiced in invisibility. When she turned, their eyes met across the space. Neither spoke. She only dipped her head, a small, cautious gesture that seemed to ask, "Did I do something wrong again?" Nathaniel couldn't answer. Something within him gave way, gentle and irrevocable, like the last leaf surrendering to winter. Later, back in his grandfather's study, he placed the staff record back into the drawer. But he did not tuck away the page with Emma's name. He left it on the desk in plain view, as if finally he understood. She had always been a part of this place, and perhaps she had never really left at all. That night, as Emma gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to end her shift, something made her glance upstairs. The light in the old study still glowed. She saw Nathaniel standing at the window, looking down, unmoving, unhurried, his eyes no longer sharp or cold, but filled with something else entirely, something unspoken, fragile, and strangely familiar. Wind whipped across the tiled roof, making the curtains shudder in restless waves, carrying with it the thick, heady promise of rain. The sky outside sank lower and lower, clouds pulling down until the trees around the lake seemed swallowed by fog. In the kitchen, Emma wiped a spill from the long wooden table. Her hand froze when voices drifted in from the hall, distant, indistinct, but sharp enough to chill her blood. Need everything finalized before winter. Yes, the entire estate, house, furniture, the lake property. Put it on the market. Price doesn't matter, I just want it done. Her heart gave a jolt. Emma edged quietly into the hall, pressing herself against a stone pillar. Through a narrow gap, she saw Nathaniel speaking with a man in a dark suit, real estate documents clutched in his hands. In that instant, the world seemed to mute itself. She didn't hear the rain tapping softly on the roof. She didn't hear the chandelier above sway gently with the wind. All she heard was this: he's going to sell the house, and with it, she would lose everything. Again. Before their conversation even ended, Emma moved. Swift and impulsive, she slipped outside, circling the west wing where Nathaniel often lingered alone at night. She didn't think. She only knew that if she didn't ask, if she didn't hear it from his own mouth, the not knowing would destroy her. She found him standing under the awning, hands stuffed into his pockets, staring out at the lake. His posture was closed, distant, the shape of someone long used to shutting out the world. Emma stepped closer, her voice raw with urgency. "Are you really going to sell this house?" Nathaniel turned, visibly startled to see her. his eyes, briefly softened just for a moment before cooling again. Emma clenched her hands. "I lived here once," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "When I was little, this was the first place I ever thought of as home. And now, and if you sell it, who will remember the children who once believed a house could heal them?" Nathaniel held her gaze, unmoving. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, firm, and cold. "Memories don't feed the future, Emma. I don't need a drawing anymore. I need closure." The words sliced through her like glass. She swayed slightly but steadied herself. Her voice broke as she asked, almost pleading, "So it's all that's left here. It doesn't matter anymore." He didn't answer, and in his silence Emma found all the confirmation she needed. She stepped back. Once. Twice. Then turned. Rain, as if waiting for this very moment, came crashing down as she left the shelter of the awning. It poured relentlessly onto her shoulders, soaked her hair until it clung to her cheeks, seeped through her thin jacket and chilled her to the bone. But none of it cut as deep as what she felt inside. Emma didn't stop. She crossed the garden, her shoes slipping in the wet grass, mud splashing her ankles. She didn't shield herself. She didn't glance back. Years ago she had been driven from this house against her will, and now she was leaving it on her own. Yet the ache was the same. She was being left behind, beneath the awning. Nathaniel remained where he stood. His hands fell from his pockets, curling slowly into fists. He shut his eyes tightly, as though to block out the weight settling heavily inside his chest. He had thought he was used to people leaving, so why, this time, did it hurt so much? A distant rumble of thunder cracked across the lake. Upstairs, wind battered the window of the gallery. The curtains flew back, revealing the child's drawing still hanging quietly on the wall. A small house glowing with light, 3 people holding hands beneath a smiling sun. On this cold, rain-soaked night, one had walked away carrying a fractured heart, and the other remained behind, for the first time in his life, feeling the first splinter deep within a carefully locked heart. After the rain, Lakehurst stood strangely hollow. Everything glistened with leftover water, releasing faint trails of dampness into the heavy air, like sorrow that hadn't yet settled. The lake behind the house lay perfectly still. The sky deepened to a muted blue, and thin slants of evening light broke through the clouds, cutting softly across the mansion's towering windows. Upstairs, in the attic gallery, Nathaniel Carter stood alone before the old crayon drawing. A pale wind stirred through the cracked window, nudging the cream-colored curtains in and out, as though the house itself were breathing. In his hand, he held a letter, small, delicate and heavy enough to crack something inside him. Emma's letter. He had found it the night before, quietly left at the base of the drawing. The paper was soft and blurred at the edges, stained with rain or maybe tears. A house is worth more than any fortune if it can hold a child's trust. I used to believe that as long as someone remembered, I hadn't been truly forgotten. But if even the most beautiful things can be sold away, what then is left of us? Nathaniel folded the letter slowly, his hands unsteady, not from cold but from something deeper. For 30 years he had lived among contracts, property lines, and deals struck before the ice in his glass could melt. And yet, no signed paper had ever undone him the way this simple note now did. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "You can sell anything, son. Anything except what keeps you human." At the time he had scoffed. Trust? Memories? What value did they hold in ledgers and investments? But now, as he stood beneath the faded drawing a little girl had left behind like a soft-spoken miracle, he understood. No, memories did not feed the future, but they gave it meaning. Nathaniel left the gallery, his footsteps steady, yet changed. He entered the library where plans for the estate sale lay neatly arranged on the table, diagrams, proposals, valuations, everything ready for his signature. He sat down. Opened his laptop. The email draft was already composed. Subject: confirming sale of Lakehurst. finalize by December. His fingers hovered over send, paused. The desk lamp cast a soft glow across the room, catching on the framed drawing once more. The little house, the laughing sun, the imagined happiness. And suddenly a sound, not from the room but from within. A child's laugh, not real but vivid nonetheless. The sound of a boy once imagining light inside a dark house. Nathaniel's chest tightened. He didn't need to sell this house, he needed to keep it. Not for himself, but for those still brave enough to dream. He pressed delete. The email vanished. He didn't draft another. Didn't call his lawyer, he simply breathed. The next day, Nathaniel made a call to an old friend who worked in community arts. His voice was quiet but certain. "I'm not selling Lakehurst anymore," he said. "I want to turn it into something. Cheltenham was center for kids, for those who don't have a place to dream." The friend hesitated. "You're sure? That land is worth—" "I know," Nathaniel interrupted gently, "but not everything valuable has a price. Once, I survived because of a drawing. Now I want to make sure others can too." That afternoon at an art school across town, Emma finished a sketching class. As she gathered her things, she looked up to find Nathaniel standing quietly at the gate, a slim envelope in hand. No. Expensive coat. No polished card, just him, uncertain, awkward but genuine. Emma approached. She didn't speak, didn't turn away. Nathaniel offered the envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside was a new blueprint, Lakehurst Center for Community Arts, and beneath it, a handwritten note in soft blue ink. "For the children who still need a place to trust." Emma's eyes filled, but the tears stayed put. There was no defensiveness now, only quiet recognition. Nathaniel spoke softly, steady and true. "I used to believe the greatest asset was wealth, but it isn't. The real treasure is the people we choose to hold on to." A breeze swept through the courtyard, catching one loose sheet from Emma's sketchbook. Nathaniel bent to retrieve. It was simple. A red-roofed house, glowing windows, 3 figures holding hands. Emma smiled, tender and knowing, and Nathaniel whispered almost to himself, "I never dared to draw it again. But maybe now, it's time." That evening, from her seat on the bus, Emma looked back toward the lake. Lakehurst stood bathed in soft golden light, no longer distant or cold. A new sign hung at its gate, Lakehurst Center for Community Arts, coming soon. And inside, behind tall windows, a man wiped glass beside a girl in work gloves, both laughing quietly together. Sometimes the most precious thing is not the house itself, but the reason two people find to stay in each other's hearts. A year had passed. Autumn had returned to the lake in Connecticut, gentler and warmer than usual. The breeze sifted through trees turning gold, carrying the scent of dry leaves, fresh paint, and watercolor palettes from nearby art classes. Lakehurst was no longer a hushed monument to memory. Now, the house thrummed with life. Children's laughter echoed through its halls, blending with the soft strains of music, the hum of poetry read aloud, the scratch of brushes on canvas, and voices weaving easily into one another, the kind of everyday symphony that once felt impossible within these long-abandoned walls. Emma Brooks stood by a second-floor window, bathed in the golden hush of late afternoon. The light dusted her cheek like honey. She held her sketchpad loosely, half-finished pencil lines trailing across the page. Her eyes drifted outside, to the garden below. There, beneath the wide shade of trees, children scattered with crayons and paints. Among them, Nathaniel, crouched low, patiently showing a young boy how to hold his brush just right. He wore a soft ivory shirt, sleeves casually rolled. His hair was slightly tousled, his expression light, as though in teaching others to see, he'd finally remembered how to see himself. Emma smiled, not at anything specific, but at everything. At how somehow, after all the fractures and farewells, everything was exactly where it belonged. When Nathaniel looked up, their eyes met across the distance. He rose, leaving the cluster of students behind, and crossed the garden toward the house. His steps were unhurried, free of the weight and hesitation they once carried. When he reached her, he took her hand. He didn't speak right away. Only when she gently squeezed his fingers did he lean in, his voice soft, threaded with quiet gratitude. "Thank you for believing that even small dreams deserve to be kept." Emma didn't answer. She simply rested her head lightly against his shoulder, and they stayed like that, gazing out across the lake where sunlight glinted like spilled gold on the water's surface. The wind whispered through the leaves, brushing past them with the tenderness of a blessing. Across the garden, a little girl held up her very first drawing, beaming at her friends. "I drew a house with flowers and people smiling inside." Hearing this, Emma let out a soft laugh, her hand still entwined with Nathaniel's. Lakehurst, once a forgotten echo of what had been, had finally become something more, a true home, where anyone could arrive with a fragile hope, pick up a pencil, and trust that there would always be a place in this world waiting just for them. Perhaps all of us carry a fragment of memory, an unfulfilled promise, a glance long faded, or simply a half-finished drawing from childhood. Some choose to bury theirs. Some learn to forget. But others, like Emma and Nathaniel, choose to hold on. Because sometimes, a beautiful memory is reason enough to love again, to love another, to love a home, and after all the breaking and mending, to love oneself once more. Thank you for walking with us through this story, all the way to its quiet end. If it touched your heart, we invite you to share that warmth. Click like, leave a comment below, and subscribe to join us on future journeys. We'll see you again in stories where love always finds its way home.